received LLB honors from King's College University, qualified as a fellow member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants, completed smaller company management program at Harvard Business School, made Aliyah in 1980, one of the founding governors of Gurion University of Connecticut, founded a committee for the university called the Desert Dome, which raised money for the Midreshet's Devoter, half of BGU, given money to the vascular surgery unit in Soroka, part of the Gurion University Medical School, given student nurses recreation area, given numerous support to student associations.
Good morning. Why am I here? It's a Board of Governors meeting in Beersheba starting on Monday. The only problem is it's run on very similar lines to the North Korean Party Congress. You had an opportunity to clap when told that that's it. And if you're a donor, you can be relieved of some money, patted on your back and sent away for another year. So, that's why I'm here. 45 years ago, I helped start the university. It is, of course, one of Israel's greatest successes. One only has to look at the magnificent campus, engage the enthusiasm of the students who flock south to the desert to enjoy the best quality university life in the country, and of course to see how it has been the catalyst for the development of the Negev in general and Beersheba in particular, to realize how true that is. The trouble is that in much the same way as the great empire of Rome was undermined by corruption from within, the lack of corporate governance, which started under President Avishai Braverman, has now reached a point where elements of the university are now completely out of control and are working against both the interests of the university itself and the country to which it belongs. I use the word corruption in a very, very specific way. To illustrate that, I'd like to quote from the Ethics Committee of the Safra Center at Harvard University. We are concerned with widespread or systematic practices that undermine the integrity of an institution or public trust in that institution. Unlike more frequently studied examples of individual corruption, such as bribery, institutional corruption tends to involve practices that are legal. I intend to deal with two specific areas, but as the revolt of the BGU faculty in Eilat further demonstrates, it goes far beyond merely these two. In introducing these examples, it's obviously important to examine who controls the university. I can't sing so much, we don't need music. Okay, under the present system, the board nominally consists of several hundred names, the overwhelming majority of whom never ever put in an appearance at the Board of Governors meeting. In the past few years, sometimes as few as 20 have turned up. And I can personally attest to the fact that in the past, resolutions were improperly passed without a quorum. So much so that this administration has abolished the need for a quorum. And now it's abolished the need for substantive resolutions. The Executive Committee, which I believe is entirely composed with one exception, the chairman of the Board of Governors, who never turns up at their meetings, of Israelis. This is a great illustration of the principle of no taxation without representation as far as foreign donors are concerned, is a self-perpetuating oligarchy dominated by representatives of the faculty and the administration. And the few public members of the committee are not subject to any form of public scrutiny or confirmation by the Board of Governors. Let us look at the public members of the Executive Committee. The chairman, Mr. Yair Green, and again I use my words advisedly, who, if there is any substance in the claims put forward by Mr. Picard, the Madoff liquidator appointed by the US courts to liquidate the Madoff funds, and I repeat it, according to the claims filed in the US court, if these are proved, would rank as one of the biggest criminals in Israeli history. When the facts alleged by the liquidator became public knowledge, neither members of the Executive Committee nor the administration of the university were prepared to invoke the universally accepted convention that a person in Mr. Green's position steps down until his innocence is established or otherwise. If one reads his letter of explanation to the Executive Committee, and from what the Vice President of the University, Amos Drury, told me personally, nobody saw the slightest need or desirability for him to step down, and he's only just decided not to stand for election after the Board of Governors, re-election after the Board of Governors meeting as a result of growing public agitation. It's also indicative that the two vice-chairmen of the Executive Committee, admirable people no doubt, are in their dotage, in their late 80s and 90s. And several others in the committee, several other public members of the committee are of similarly advanced years. And therefore they are merely pawns in the hands of the administration whose characteristics were delineated by the previous speaker. The lack of proper corporate governance has impacted the handling of the well-known fact that the Faculty of Social Sciences in general and the Department of Politics and Government in particular is now a bastion of ultra-left-wing and anti-Zionist activity in Israel and abroad. President Karmi repeatedly lies to donors about the extent of the problem and says it's only one person, Eve Gordon. But this is a much broader issue, and it is a continuing one. The Department of Politics remains an anti-pluralistic bastion of one-sided, anti-Israel, far-left propaganda. One in which no pro-Israel or no non-leftist opinion may be expressed. But radical anti-Israel framers can be found throughout BGU and not just in that department or faculty. Gordon, of course, is the best known, but he is only the tip of the iceberg at BGU. In addition to his long track record of calling for world boycotts of Israel and denouncing Israel as a supposed fascist, apartheid, Nazi-like state, he has apparently broken the new Knesset law against BDS, boycott, delegitimization and sanctions. In 2012, he contributed a chapter in a book entitled The Case for Sanctions Against Israel. It is. The rector, Professor Tzvi Cohen, refused to investigate the case and merely accepted Gordon's explanation that he did not know how this chapter based on an old article found its way into the book. All this when the editor of the book thanked Gordon for his help. Amongst other academics at BGU who continue to build their careers upon anti-Israel agitprop and leftist activism are the following. Oren Yifkacher, a geographer, teaching politics, as previous speaker said, nobody sticks to the subject they're contracted to teach. Most of his career has been devoted to misrepresenting Israel as an apartheid regime, whose recent academic work promotes bogus Bedouin legal claims to the ownership of the entire Negev. This was laughed out of court by judge. Yiftachel did not condemn Hamas terrorists as they fired rockets into Israel, but dismissed it as a protest against supposed Israeli imprisonment of the entire Gaza population. I thought we left a few years ago. Lev Greenberg, best known for his accusing Israel of committing symbolic genocide when it killed the leader of Hamas, and who insists that Hamas terrorists are the 21st century moral equivalents of the Maccabee heroes. In his book and many articles, Ginsburg demands that Israel ceases to be a Jewish state. Instead, he wants to create a binational federation with both Jews and Palestinians who live in fully secular, pluralistic paradise. A bit like Syria and Iraq at the moment. Ginsburg has also claimed that Israel is a non-democracy dominated by a military regime. As an immigrant from Argentina, Ginsburg has used his Spanish language skills to inform the public in Latin America about the alleged racist and militaristic state of Israel. Now we come to David Newman, the spider in the web of BDS at BGU. He continues to serve as a defender of those in his department and beyond promoting BDS. And he even tried to excuse Greenberg for writing that Israel commits symbolic genocide. Newman appeared in a British television documentary which was the modern equivalent of the protocols of the Elders of Zion, i.e. the Jews have all the money, the Jews control the press, and the state of Israel is all bad. Therefore wields extraordinary power. Writing in the Jerusalem Post, Newman has compared the separation barrier to the Berlin Wall. Newman was in the media during the past year, as we've heard, for his efforts to prevent the shutdown of the Political Studies Department at BGU. Newman frequently attacks donors, me of course in particular, and governors at BGU as being undeserving of exercising freedom of speech. It should be strongly emphasized that Newman single-handedly engineered the anti-Israel Department of Politics in its present form. This ought to make you laugh, but it's not very funny. But Newman was chosen to go to England for a year to fight against BDS. Actually, he spent most of the year having an extramarital affair, which he tried to prolong by applying totally unsuccessfully for several academic positions in the UK. So that's what I think of his standards. Danny Flick, politics, head of the anti-Israel propaganda group Physicians for Human Rights Israel. The group, which was chaired in the 1990s by Neve Gordon, has denounced the Medical Association of Israel for promoting has been denounced by the Medical Association of Israel for promoting a highly defamatory view of the treatment of Palestinians. IAM Round, Department of Middle Eastern Studies, is a member of a group that advocates nuclear disarmament in the meanwhile. He wrote a book which he says that because Israel is traumatized by the Holocaust, it is exaggerating the fear of nuclear Iran. Dr. Ayal Nir, who teaches chemistry at BGU, is not only anti-Israel, but was in the media during the past year openly calling for critics of the left to be murdered. He was not prosecuted or disciplined by BGU. Sorry? Ayal Nir. Dalia Scheidlin, conflict resolution, seems to have very little time for research given her engagement with the anti-Israel 972 magazine website founded by European sources. Scheidlin has openly admitted that the Department of Politics and Government of BGU is modelled on Antioch College in Ohio, a radical private liberal arts college where the faculty are training students to participate in progressive social action. Idan Landau, Department well, but was imprisoned for refusing to serve in the military reserves. Following his 2012 imprisonment, he protested being docked a week's payment by the university. A petition organised by other leftist faculty demanded he should be paid the entire month's salary in contradiction to the rules of the National Insurance Institute. This is just short limited, since I am limited by time, but Israel Academic Monitor carries information on these and more than a dozen of radical faculty on their website. I now return to the second instance, where the lack of corporate governance has failed the university and the country. As is well known, the entire world has learned about the politicisation at BGU and the amazingly poor academic standings in the Department of Politics and Government and Faculty of Social Sciences generally, thanks to the international panel set up by Malak, the Israel Council on Higher Education, to investigate that department. But I don't want to go into what we've heard the previous speaker give us devastating news about, so I'll just confine my comments to say that despite proposing the shutting down of the department due to low academic standards and political propaganda and indoctrination and showing it wasn't a serious body of scholarship and research, it has also addressed bias, absence of pluralism and treatment of students in the department. What have the university done about it? Not very much. They were told they had to hire new people. Well, two of those three hirees are radical leftists. While the council has now backed off from the call for the immediate closure of BGU Department of Politics, following BGU's promises to introduce serious structural reforms in the department and to introduce diversity via new hirees, nothing of the sort has happened, and under Rivka, Karmi, and Cohen and Newman, nothing will ever happen. Indeed, as I have said, only one of the new hirees could be remotely considered as a mainstream political scientist. Amongst the others, Michal Givoni is even more radical than the rest. She specializes in a critical theory known as moral witnessing. Moral witnessing, which you might not have heard of, does not believe in empirical reality and fact. When witnessing, they are commanded to look at the underlying evil of the situation. That is, in this case, the evil of Israeli occupation. Givoni's style moral witnessing made it into breaking the silence with the report to Judge Goldstone. Givoni is also involved with a group of critical legal scholars who demanded open borders for all types of refugees. The group has been highly critical of Israel for importing illegals from Africa. Ayelet Harel Shalev, another far leftist who worked for the National Adala Group, was the third hiree. Harel Shalev was also a doctoral student of the now infamous Professor Barzilai, we heard about, who was in charge of evaluating the changes made by the department to comply with the international community's recommendation. By applying more of the same, the department has defined the recommendations of the international community, which promoted the Council of Higher Education which prompted the Council of Higher Education to issue a new warning on closing the department. It was here that the corporate government has failed most. Rivka Karmi insisted that all necessary changes have been made, and the appeal was, again, we've heard, and the first speaker, to the international community of scholars to defend the department from the government's witch hunt. Very well, lady. This was an unprecedented breach of protocol and shows the university's intent on protecting the faculty at all costs, and are spreading the gospel of apartheid and promoting BDS throughout the world. Works, instead of providing a fair balance of education in the classroom, a step clearly mandated by a 2010 resolution of Malak, this large cadre of radical faculty have used their courses to indoctrinate students, and we'll hear more on that. Again, I speak from personal standing in front of a map showing only Palestine and not Israel. He taught that the Jews, and there was someone who else was there, the next speaker was at that lecture, so double confirmation. He taught that the Jews had colonized somebody else's land. This is what government and donor money is being spent on. So Jewish and foreign non-Jewish students are being taught in Medinat Israel, in a government-funded university, that this country doesn't belong to us. Amazing. He went on to say that the Ashkenazim, which I plead guilty, persecuted the Mizrahim, like my wife, who should be encouraged to return to their brethren in those democratic and peaceful paradises such as Iran, Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. You will hear from one of his students, Rachel, but there are numerous incidents of students being prejudiced, marked down for not towing the ultra-left BDS anti-Zionist line. But unfortunately, too few have the courage to stand up and complain. What have Rivka Karmi, Vice President Drury, and Rector Cohen done about it? They have encouraged this phenomenon by doing nothing and allowing the continuing recruitment and promotion of more and more of them to the virtual exclusion of any other political point of view. At the same time, they've been lying to donors and claim they can do nothing about it, and that they are against it, none of which is patently true. And even if it was, the maxim, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen, applies. I, like most people who support the state of Israel, and in my case who've come to live in it, believe that this state of affairs is unacceptable. This is a country at war and under attack throughout the world, particularly in academia, where our Jewish children in the diaspora are continually harassed and attacked, prompted by what the Gordons and the Yiftachels and the others say. The university, as I have said, is funded from two sources: the state, to which it owes loyalty, and donors, mainly from abroad, who think, perhaps misguidedly, that support for Ben Gurion University, which bears the name of the founder of the state, is meant to sustain the Zionist dream and not to contribute to actions aimed at destroying it. The solution, mainly but not entirely, lies with the government. It has to introduce an effective system of corporate governance and oversight, so the boundaries of academic freedom and freedom of speech are not crossed and abused. You cannot shout fire in a crowded cinema if there is no fire. You cannot, freedom of movement does not permit you to go through a red light. Every freedom has to have some form of limit, particularly in the world we live in and the particular circumstances of the state of Israel. Nobody, the other pressure has to come from donors, especially major ones, to make their donations conditional on reform and getting rid of treason and sedition. Because make no mistake, calling for BDS and all the rest of it is treason and sedition. The university administration has accused me of all sorts of things because I feel strongly enough not to remain silent. It is very often the fate of the bringer of bad news to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. So be it.
Thank you, Michael Ross. And now we're going to hear Rachel Abraham. She's about to grab